Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tales of the Sale. Lucky episode 13. It is February of 2021. We are joining you during a winter snowstorm in the Northeast, which I think I hit the other two gentlemen on here who I will have say hi. So we're joined by Tyler Stone. Say hi, Tyler.
Oh.
And Glenn, the farmer Van Meter, who helped teach me a lot about why my snowblower doesn't work today.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I'm Tom Chairborne Mullane. And Mitch was gracious enough to explain to my entire military history class during his recent stopover exactly why I have that nickname. And so now I'm never going to hear the end of it from all the seniors before they leave.
Well, it's better than anything else we could have given you, like a medal or something, or bandages.
I feel like there are a lot worse nicknames I could have than being famous for sitting down, you know.
To be clear, it wasn't sitting down.
No, it's not. You get attacked by a chair when you deserve it. I really did. So we're gonna go through what we've been up to. I'll let Glenn take the lead on this one because I think Glenn has actually won the prize for the most painting between the last podcast and now. So Glenn, tell him what you've been up to.
Well, I don't know about that, but I have been painting up my Phalanx Consortium German starter set, which is 25, 26 guys. I finished 8 or so. I made the bet with Tom, but due to being snowed in with a toddler and a newborn, I've made very little progress otherwise, but they're mostly done. Also halting my progress this weekend has been a rash of baby lambs being born as part of the farm stuff. We're at that time of the year. And then I've also been prepping for French and Indian War stuff, trying to get a campaign together or figured out, and just anxiously waiting that release from Firelock. They're next on the painting queue, more French and Indians.
It's been a lot of fun getting like regular updates on the baby lambs, because I think you've been sending Tyler and I some pictures and stuff and videos, right?
Yep, and obligatory pictures of the kid being cute, playing with them, that kind of thing.
I mean, like, I still remember this amazing moment when I was visiting Ireland and we were on this tour bus, and the cars in front of us, there's a bunch of lambs that ran across the road, and the last little lamb, the baby, got kind of clipped by the car. And like it was okay, but the little baby lamb was limping away. And all the girls on the bus, because this is college, all the girls on the bus are going, "Oh no!" They're all concerned. And the driver gets on the PA system and he goes, "Oh, don't you all worry. That little baby lamb is going to be okay." And then he turns off the microphone and he turns to me, who's sitting in the front, and he goes, "We're going to be eating that baby lamb for dinner." And so every time you talk about him, think about that story.
Well, that's kind of how it goes, because people are like, "Oh, baby lambs," like, oh. And it's like, well, a lot of these are boys, and we don't care about them. That's just cha-ching, because I know I'm selling them or eating them.
That's how Tots got Facebook canceled. No.
Yep.
How dare!
I feel like Glenn's gonna send us horrifying pictures, like baby lamb juxtaposed with preparing the lamb for being delicious. Put that as delicately as possible.
There's that kids show, Lamb Chops, and it escaped me how messed up that name was.
Oh gosh,
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, it is.
It wasn't lamb lollipop.
That's just gotta put a line somewhere.
So Glenn, other than painting the Germans and being on Lamb Watch, you are also prepping for your French and Indian war games. Like, what does that entail again? Are you like go into more detail on the campaign you might be playing?
I kind of screwed up a little bit because I got a wonderful resource book from Osprey about the 1754 Quebec campaign, and I was working on that, and then I realized it's the wrong war. So I was starting to write up scenarios for that, but I think I'm gonna have to dive back in and find stuff within the correct war.
And for those of you who are listening carefully or listening to this more than once, that's a hint for something
Bit
that
of
will
a
come
hint.
later. Something come later, and we're just gonna drop that later because there will be trivia, and there will be a prize.
There will be a test.
There will be a test later. There will be a test later. Tyler, what have you been up to?
So anyone that was, I'm kind of out of things to paint. I think we talked about that on the January episode when we went over all of our resolutions. I've kind of got most of my Firelock stuff painted up. So anyone that was on for the last of the painting hangouts saw that exact same day, so this past Friday as we're recording this, I got a whole box full of Blood and Valor stuff. I didn't go Glenn's route and get it from Phalanx. I ordered it from Gripping Beast or Woodbine Miniatures. One company owns the other. I think Gripping Beast is the parent company, but I ordered in some Turks and some Anzacs, Ottomans and Anzacs, and spent the entire paint night getting those filed, which they're actually pretty good models. They're very clean. I didn't have a lot of stuff to file off of them. Straightened out and glued to bases. And that's all I've been up to hobby-wise. Otherwise, I've been snowed in, or I'm just sitting here waiting for things to get back to normal someday, maybe.
Well, I guess I've been busier than I thought.
You have been busier than me.
Because I finished painting 4 battle mechs, which is not related to what we podcast about typically, but Glenn, being a connoisseur of such things, is consistently bothered because I don't remember what things are what. I just kind of paint them so they look as cool as possible.
You're not alone.
I did succeed in painting my Braves. So just like Glenn finished painting the Germans he said he would, I also succeeded in painting the Braves I said I would. In fact, I even painted another unit of like loaders for the cannon because I had a group of 4 of those guys. I think I painted them on a night when me and Glenn just popped on, because we've occasionally done like an impromptu thing where we'll just post something if people are on, and if they want to come on Discord with us to chat and see what we're up to, they're welcome to do that. But not like a regular thing like the bi-weekly paint nights we've been running. So
Go ahead. Didn't you do some musket sailors? I thought that was the monthly thing for you.
So I finished the Braves. I finished 8 musket sailors. I finished the 4 loaders, and then I started the a unit of pikemen, 8 of them, which are almost done. So yeah, I've done a lot. Then I didn't realize.
Yeah, you did more than I did.
And
Yeah.
I stopped painting the the pikemen. It's funny because like I feel like there's no shortage of times when people have told me that they're terrible, like as a unit to bring. But I don't care because they look cool. And Mike Tunez sent me the missing pikes because I had dropped them and they fell through the cracks of my floorboards because my 100-year-old house occasionally just like eats stuff. It's sort of like The Simpsons, where there's probably like pirate treasure hidden somewhere on the boards, or some like 1920s bootleg money. Who knows? This house is like 100 years old and it keeps finding new surprises for me. But I stopped because I wanted to be able to have them hold the pikes, and I knew that I needed something to do that. And so nobody can see me holding this up, but I have a Dremel tool, which I had been meaning to buy for a long time. And when I came home from Home Depot with it, along with a special set of the very, very small drill bits that you can buy as a companion piece to it, my wife's like, "What is that for?" And I'm like, "Well, it has a lot of uses." It comes with it comes with a lot of tools and attachments. Think of it as like a vacuum cleaner, but it doesn't. It just makes messes and it can cut things. And she's like, "Oh, great, okay." And I didn't want to tell her. Literally, the only reason I bought this was so I could drill holes in these guys' hands.
You have to be careful using a Dremel with that because you
Yeah.
don't need as much of a hole as you think you do.
No, I have a very, very small bit, and I think I know what I'm doing. I think I know what I'm doing. 'Cause
I was
my
also going to
alternative would
recommend
be to use a full drill, and I know that's a stupid choice. So I'm not
Sitting
using
there
a
with a
drill.
drill press, yeah.
I would also recommend a pin vise that you just twist with your fingers, because with a Dremel you might put that. You could easily line it up wrong and put a hole through, like, I don't know, his torso.
Okay, that's a good call. I have one of those,
Be
so
careful.
not a problem. I will try not to shoot my eye out like Ralphie from A Christmas Story. I promise. Other than that, I remember having a long laugh at you guys because we got our notification from the Firelot guy in charge of the quartermaster program that he was doing last minute, collections for the previous quarter, right? And there was this hilarious moment where I left my phone off, and as sometimes happens with you two, it's like, you have 85 new messages, and I'll check it, and it was basically you guys feverishly kind of yelling at each other, but mostly at yourselves, being like, "When did I write that article? Like, which podcast? How many people downloaded it? Like, where are my models at?" And you're trying to put in all the stuff before the deadline to make sure you got a few doubloons. But yeah, and then you were like, "Tom, like, did you turn in your stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, like I turned them all in already." Because I do them like as I go, like as the event happens, I submit it, and then you guys made fun of me for that, which I feel like is totally justified. It's one of the few times I can actually point to being organized in any way. But yeah.
Hey, look, I have it on good authority that we're just following in the footsteps of far greater blogs than our podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I heard somebody had to put in several, many events and articles.
Yes.
I'll leave the community to figure out who that somebody was.
Well, we're going to continue our regular segment of trying to give people some strategies to use on different missions and scenarios from the Blood and Plunder rulebook. And I believe we're going to move into our first scenario out of No Peace Beyond the Line. Or yes?
It should be, yeah. We only have
Well,
one more out of the core rulebook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
so
kind
in
of
doing
generic
two,
one.
the second one will be from NPBTL.
And we are continuing to basically cover like the land-based scenarios, and then we'll do some more specific stuff on the ocean-based stuff, because the strategies for those would obviously be different. And you guys know a heck of a lot more about that than me. Oh, the one other thing that I'll mention before we get started on that is, and there's an article, a full battle report for those of you interested in popping on to No Dice, No Glory to read it. But I did actually get in a game with a friend of mine, and I won. I won 2 games actually, but I only did a write up of the first one because I didn't take good pictures of the second one. But yeah, I won fair and square.
Don't want to get boastful.
I even managed to misinterpret one of the special rules against myself, and still
which one?
succeeded. I think it was what the grizzled veteran can do. I assume that he you lose a fatigue, but that only applies if there's like melee combat, and we were using it like every time. I forget the precise rule. Tough.
Oh right, battle hardened.
Battle hardened. Yeah. So we were interpreting it in his favor pretty heavily, but when I asked you about it later, you're like, no, it's only in this circumstance, which makes sense. Because I was asking, like, why would I ever not take the special character? Because it seems like the special character is insanely good. I mean, it's still insanely good.
I was gonna say, to be fair, Grizzled Veteran and is it Sons of Neptune? Tyler,
Son of Neptune. Yeah, you have to be a sailor to get the Son of Neptune, but it does essentially the exact same thing, aside from the extra order that you can give.
And it gives expert sailor, I think. But the point is, both of these for 3 points are great investments. 3 points each, not both for 3. Sorry.
Well, speaking of great investments and planning for the future, planning to defeat your opponents in the ways that I have failed to do for 2 years prior, but finally succeeded at this past couple weeks, we're going to talk about Encounter. And we don't have a ton to say about Encounter, which is the final scenario in the base rulebook. But who wants to take the lead on this one?
I think I've read the other ones. Want me to just read through it first?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. So, Encounter. 2 opposing forces unexpectedly encounter each other while patrolling. Both sides wish to inflict as much damage to the enemy as possible. Set up on land. The entire board is land terrain, but no specific terrain setup is required. The defending player chooses one board corner. The attacking player will deploy in the opposite board corner. Game length is 6 turns. Objectives, none. There are no objectives. Use the standard rules for strike points and inflict the most harm to your foe! Exclamation point. Guys, it's the usual one that you play at the game store when you're like 8 and just want to smash models together. Or you're short on time and don't feel like doing a more difficult scenario.
I think the biggest point I have to make about this one is, like many of the other scenarios where you have a 15-inch deployment zone coming off the sides, if you cut it to a 3x3 board, cut 6 inches off the deployment zone so that you don't end up deploying on top of each other. Unless you want to just get extra killy real fast. In this game, there's no objective to worry about, so that could actually be good. I don't know.
But I feel like it would favor certain types of forces, right? Because if you are starting right up on top of them, it definitely favors a force that took a lot of, like, bracelet pistols or like better than average melee weapons.
Turn 1 point blank Lanceros just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I like making them run. The other thing that I can actually admit to, looking at this after laughing at how simple it is, it's corner-to-corner deployment. And usually when you think of these kinds of scenarios, you think of them as, at least I always did, you get like kind of the long edge of the board and your opponent gets the other long edge of the board. So corner-to-corner does make it a little bit more interesting because most of your army is going to start, Glenn's the math guy, but most of your army is going to start kind of far away from your opponent unless you really pack that leading corner of your deployment zone.
I also feel like because of the varied, like, normally when somebody sets up a board, because of what you just described, right? Like when they set the terrain, they probably have in mind like a scenario where the players would be moving at each other horizontally, or the players are moving at each other, from the short edges. And they don't always prepare terrain specifically for moving diagonally across it. And so I feel like because of the way all of these scenarios are, as we're kind of like looking back on some of the ones we've earlier done, they do encourage you to kind of deploy the terrain in a variety of ways, because the way you'll play can vary very differently. It can be very different depending on where things sit on the board. So
yeah, I just did the math because I'm a nerd, and if you put a model in each corner that you're allowed to, as close together as you can, once you've adjusted the deployment zones, you're still starting 19 inches away from each other. So,
you're saying if you just put them in those closest corners to each other,
right?
Okay.
Because they're 18 inches away from each other on like the x-axis and 6 away on the y-axis, and once you do the diagonal, it comes out to about 19.
Okay.
One of the other cool things that I'll just kind of mention in passing as we kind of move into the next book is that one of the cool things they do towards the back half of this book, which is on page 142, is the scenario special rules. Because I feel like one of the ways that the game really shines is when you use it to try to recreate like interesting historical scenarios, moments, what ifs, and things like that. And I feel like the rule set very much lends itself to that because they give you this set of different mechanics that you can put in for color. My personal favorite, of course, is drunk, where one of your forces has been heavily drinking, and each force has to roll a d10 for each of their units, and if you roll 5+, you're drunk for the rest of the game. So like, there's all these fun things you can do to simulate different aspects of the kind of fighting you'd see in the Caribbean. There's fortifications, which they don't have. They have a few rules, but we're going to get some more elaborate ones later. I guess is probably what's happening. We'll throw. Is Joe working on those?
It is Joe that's working on those.
So we'll throw Joe under the bus and be like, Joe, like, what are those rules, man? It's like you gotta there's all sorts of fun stuff. Sounding the alarm, killing sentries, caught unaware. You have a whole mess of rules you could toss in for color if you're playing.
I do like, glancing through real quick. I do like random game length because normally these go for 6 turns, and most of my games have been over well before then. But this could end it on turn 4, which could make it really hard in some attacking scenarios. And other scenarios, it could go on to turn 10, or I'm sorry, 8.
Right.
Because of the way it's done. But it's increasingly unlikely that turns will go past 5 or 6.
I do like that as a mechanic. The other one that I really like on here is hidden setup. I just love that kind of a unknown mechanic because, in most of these games, in almost every tabletop game, you have foreknowledge of where the other player is going to be and where they are. Like the forces are deployed, that's it. But there are a handful of games that play with that. And in this case, you could set it up so you have tokens. You put some of them have numbers on them, and 2 of them are blank. And you get to deploy the tokens in all over the place, but they're face down, so you can't see them. And then once you've all done that, you flip them over, and we get to see where they are, and there's a big reveal. So I like stuff like that because it just adds a lot of like fun to the game. And they really went out of their way to add stuff like that to it. So even though Encounter is by itself kind of just your generic let's fight it out scenario, because of the way this game is set up and the extra rules they added, there's ways you can spice the thing up if you're playing with a friend.
Yeah, it also helps in scenario development because if you're like me trying to make a campaign for something, you can look through for the basic scenarios to get the idea of what you want, and then just layer on a couple of special rules to really get the specific situation you're looking for. Now, and this is kind of segueing into the next one. The basic rulebook has your basic battle formats. A lot of things that are like line up from the corners, go after an objective in the middle, or something like that. But you'll start seeing more specific stuff in No Peace Beyond the Line. For instance, the first one in there is the raise scenario.
So segue that right into, do we just want to jump into it? All right.
Yeah, go for it.
So raise is, okay, I wanted to just double check. It can be played land, sea, and amphibious. We're focusing on land. So the setup for a land version of the raise scenario. Defender selects or places 2 size 1 objective buildings, which have fortitude 2 and integrity 2, along the center line of the board, at least 6 inches from any table edge and 12 inches from each other. Scenario rules. For every 4 units in the attacking force, 1 may take the torches equipment for no additional cost. Attacking units that use the lay in wait scenario special rule must set up at least 9 inches from an objective building. Mounted units must dismount before attempting to start a fire. I realize that I skipped the list for this one, but if you haven't figured it out yet, the attacker seeks to destroy buildings vital to the defender, and the defender must stop this from happening. It's your usual, town attack, kind of the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean, maybe. Deployment. Defender chooses one board edge. The attacker takes the opposite. Forces deploy as shown in the deployment diagram. Attacker's units are not placed on the board during deployment. They are held off table. Those units move in anywhere along the indicated board edge during the first turn of the game. Any bolt action players will be kind of familiar with that. When units are off the board in this fashion, activation cards are drawn for those units at the start of the turn, which they will move onto the board. The attacker moves any cannons onto the board. They start the game with 4 reload markers. A cannon may be moved onto the board as a dedicated action, but must be placed within 4 inches of the board edge and may not be moved again for the rest of the game. A heavy cannon cannot be moved into a structure or rough terrain. Or how you would manage that, because you can only move in 4 inches.
We just hoisted it into this watchtower.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's a 6-turn game length. Objectives: the defender will gain a strike point if any objective building is on fire or is destroyed at the end of the turn. And the attacker gains a strike point if there are no objective buildings on fire or destroyed by the end of turn 3.
All right, so let me ask an immediate
Or
question.
later.
Because
Or later.
I've never gotten to play this yet. And that's because I don't have any buildings built, which is sad, but I'm working on it. So how do you, like, what are the mechanics for setting a building on fire or for putting it out, or like, how does that work?
So this is where it's really rough to be the attacker in this scenario, I think, because the way the scenario is set up, you're talking about a 3-foot wide board, and the building has to be on the center line. Most buildings are about 6 inches across, so you can figure that the closest wall of the building might be about 15 inches away from your board edge. You need to move onto the board edge, get to within, I believe, an inch of the building with models from your unit, and then use a dedicated action to start a fire. And then you need to roll like an 8+, I think.
Should be a 7 or higher.
I thought torches.
I'm looking it up now.
I think torches are what makes it like a 7. Maybe it's a 9. I don't remember. Point is, it's hard to start a fire.
It is.
Having to do it by the end of turn 3, unless you're really pushing your units, you're not even going to get in contact with the building until turn 2, and then you can't do a dedicated action. So you either need to be planning for this scenario by bringing torches. Importantly, bringing 4 or more units so that you get free torches, because otherwise they're 3 points per unit. I have in my notes that cannons look promising, i.e. you might want to destroy it. It might be better to destroy a building just by shooting it, because cannonballs will travel to the building much faster than your troops.
But, like, to reiterate what Tyler read, when the attacker moves any cannons onto the board, they start the game with 4 reload markers. And I feel like I still have not played against a cannon. So I feel like they're relatively rare to see unless they're being taken as part of a like themed force. So like I haven't seen this mission played in a tournament per se. This is mostly like
this is
a game you would have planned to play.
Okay, so to clear it up, just doubling back real quick. Starting a fire with a torch. Starting a fire without a torch is a 10+, a D10.
Oh yeah, it's worse than I thought.
Yeah, with a torch, it's an 8+. Don't rely, for God's sake, don't rely on the torches. Use a fire pot or a cannon.
Yes, fire pots are a 7-up, right?
I'm checking that now. I keep having to jump pages in the book.
So to my recollection of the fire pot, you throw it, and then you get 3 dice to hit, and if any of those hit, you get to roll 1 dice for a 7-up to see if your building is now combusting.
So while Tyler's looking for the rules for fire pots, Glenn, let's talk about what kind of a force do you bring if you're the attacker to a mission like Race? Like obviously you mentioned 4+ units because you want to get the free torches.
Right.
Like what I guess would horsemen work because you want something fast? Do you want a lot of little units because you want to have a lot of potential like fire starters, like little incendiaries, or what do you think?
This is where it gets tough because those horsemen get there fast, but then they have to dismount. So like they might get there in the first turn, but then they have to dismount and they're not horsemen anymore. And I mean, most will have a brace of pistols, so that'll be nice if it comes to melee, which, spoiling the defending section a little bit, you're probably getting into melee.
But that's it, right? Once they dismount, they're done. Like, right, they're just dismounted for the rest of the game.
Right, you can't remount. It's not
Yeah.
like you have a guy. You don't have a horse. I mean, somebody could special house rule it and like have horse holder models, but that's kind of insane.
I feel like Tyler
So-
was like quietly taking notes. Get horse holder models.
Right.
So they're not from Firelock, but if you buy Dragoons from almost anybody, they'll come with somebody who's tending horses.
Tending the horses.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I know that some of the World War One World War II Polish Lancer units you can buy do come with horse holders, but that's I never really considered those part of the game. Anyways, yeah, this to me, you just have a normal force setup where you'd have units that are meant to be mobile. Obviously, they get the torches, and then I would have units that are meant to move up alongside them for a turn or two, and then provide covering fire. Like try to keep any of the defenders' units that are moving up, shot up, pinned down, shaken. I guess is a specific term.
I would also say that so if you were to play a scenario like this in the course of like a tournament, let's say, I feel like you, in a lot of circumstances, you either play to the objectives or you play to go after the opponent's force. But there are times when you don't really have a choice, and I feel like in this case, you have to follow the scenario rules and go after those points by burning those buildings. Because if you don't, you're going to wind up on the receiving end of a lot of strike points, and that goes for both sides, really, right?
This is actually the most recent game that I played, and I do have a report up on No Dice, No Glory on the main blog. I played it with solo rules, and it was my test of the French army list. I rolled the scenario randomly, so my French were in no way prepared with fire pots. I did have grenades. Grenades won't start a fire. If you don't torch a building, you are almost forced to table your opponent to win this scenario.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're going to take on turn 3, you're going to have a strike point against you. So to actually win, you need to get them to 3 strike points, or you need to set something on fire.
Yeah,
Right.
it's interesting because I feel like, that this is unique in that you are really pushed. You have to do it. Which makes sense.
Right.
I mean, that's the point, right? That's the point of the mission. But there are other games where it's very much split. Like, oh, you can just go after them and ignore the objectives. You can't.
Converse, like the mirror side of that, the other side to that is if you do start if you do get a building burning or blow a building up, whatever, however you decide to do it, you're pretty much guaranteed to win because then the defender gains a strike point. So they're now back to having to table you. This is a really hard scenario on the defender.
Well, I mean, you can see in the notes. First note I wrote in here under raises. This looks like it sucks to attack because I feel like you're almost unless you have a cannon that you're bringing and you shoot a building and it's destroyed on turn 2. You might get a second shot in turn 3, but at some point, I feel like you're almost guaranteed to get that first strike point for not having torched or destroyed a building by the end of turn 3, just because how much distance you have to cover and the statistical likelihood of you actually setting a building on fire.
But once you have something burning, that strike point goes away because remember you check at the end of each turn.
And the defender gets it. But if the defender can knock out 25% of your guys while you're on approach,
you're taking strike checks.
Right,
Strike
you're taking
checks
tests
on the way in. Yeah.
Right. That's my point. It's for the attacker, it's a rough start. Although for the defender, it might be a rough end.
Here's a question for the defender. Once a building is set on fire, can you put it out? Is there a mechanic for that or no? There's not. Once it's on fire, it's on fire.
A repair action, which I think is just a 7.
It is the only thing that you can do if you are in a burning building.
other than exit.
Oh,
Other than leave, you can leave. That's something to keep in mind. And it happened in the solo game. I had a unit occupy a building, and I was like, if I had torches, I had a unit of torches because I had the 4 units on board. I was like, if I set that on fire, I can't really do anything. So it doesn't become trench warfare. The defender can't just run up and occupy all of the buildings and have them bristling with muskets and you not be able to do anything. Because it's like, I'm not after your guys, I'm after your buildings. I'll burn it with you in it. Like,
and that actually, as an attacker, that might actually be a good idea. Just because it is kind of hard for a defender to attack a building. It might be smart to have 2 units run into one of the objective buildings and just stay put until it catches fire.
Yeah.
Like, because if you're in the building, they have to oust you. And if that means you have 2 units in the building, that means that a single one of their units has to jump in and fight 2 of your units. And that can be hard to do.
One of the things you have on here that I think is definitely something that you have to consider if you're fighting in this scenario is that if you're playing a force that is very heavily reliant on shooting and you don't have a lot of skilled melee units or any kind of dedicated melee units, you might have some tricky fights because you're going to get into these buildings, you're going to get up in it. And if you don't have the ability to hang with the other person, it could be short.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I said that you're almost guaranteed to get into melee is that if you consider the board, you've got buildings at least at 2 points on the center line. Most people will probably set up a town, which means several buildings. Your defenders start 6 inches in on the board. By the time you factor in the width of the building, the center line, and all that stuff, they have almost as far to go to get to where the attacker can start lighting fires as the attacker does. So if they want to go up there and stop the attacker from lighting fires, it's going to take them as long to get there as the attacker will. You're not going to have great, like, for most attacking units, you're going to run up to the hidden zone behind a building where the defenders can't see you. And then you're going to start the fire from there. Which means as a defender, if you have musket units or long-range units, you can only get the guys while they're on approach, because once they're behind the building, you now have to go into melee by going around the building.
Yep.
Or flanking it and providing that enfilading fire. Which would be extra funny usually, because you'll probably get rid of their cover safe. But at the same time, you're flanking. Do you have a cover save? It can get rough. You have to be, right up in the attacker's face to properly defend your buildings.
Well, I will also say that, like, I'm bummed I haven't played this yet, because I feel like it's a really fun scenario to play. Like, it looks like it really encourages closing with the enemy, getting up in everybody's business, and rapidly trying to make something happen on the board. So I feel like it encourages speed, and it's interesting. I wish I've tried this one.
Well, I'm pretty certain it's... Go on.
One thing that we didn't consider with the starting a fire is it is a dedicated action.
Yeah.
So, like Glenn said, if you get up behind and you're in the shadow of a building, you can burn a full, 3-action turn. And this is why I was thinking that it's a 7-up. For every action that you have in a dedicated action, it's a -1 bonus to the associated test.
So the torch would actually make it a 5, or could make it a 6.
The torch can get it down to a 4. You have 3 actions. Oh, sorry.
You get a bonus of +2
first, right? Yeah, you get a +2.
So
that's probably where you were getting the 8. Yep.
8 +2 gives it a 6.
Yeah, you can get it down to starting a fire on a 6-up.
Wow.
So
okay.
Again, though, it's your dedicated action. Like, you have to have that unit within 1 inch of the building before you can even attempt to start the fire, because you have to take a dedicated action as your first action. Torches are probably the best way to start the fire. You are definitely taking that first strike point. Like, you're not doing it before turn 3. I don't think.
Well, now remembering dedicated action makes it more likely to happen, but I think it's still going to be rough to completely avoid that strike point. So if you take a strike point on the way in, it's going to be a tight game for you. I hope you put a commander with a high resolve unit, and you have your fortune.
Yeah. All the fortune points.
I think
don't spend your fortunes.
I think generally this is going to be a tougher time for the attacker, if all things being equal. But I also think that there are certain forces that will be very bad at this.
Oh yeah.
Although
knowing that it's a dedicated action, you can always just throw a club on somebody that's like standing next to the building and try to give them that 8. That's a 30% chance of happening. So it's not impossible.
And you add in, if you're willing to burn a fortune on it, go for it.
Also true.
You should be able to get something burning by the time you need to.
Yeah, and it might be just enough to push your opponent's force over the edge as the defender.
All right. Well, I think we have a bet to make, Mr.
Well,
Klein.
hold on. I will say, Tom, this scenario is probably. I'm working on that campaign, and considering French and Indian Wars, the villages were always targets for both sides. This scenario will almost certainly feature into that narrative campaign.
Yes, for sure.
So it might have a couple special rules attached, like I was talking about earlier, but that'll just make it extra fun.
Oh, cool.
But bet time?
Bet time. So we're on a 2-for-2 streak. We matched each other in December. We matched each other in January.
Yep.
So I think, to be fair, I need to give myself a bigger challenge because I don't have a kid who's adorable, who's running around and screaming. I don't have a newborn. I feel like I'm okay with me giving myself more to paint than whatever you get. There should be a handicap,
You painted 20 miniatures the last time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say
I also had to assemble mine.
you did.
That took like a week in itself. It's just putting because not all the Blood and Plunder guys will know the Phalanx miniatures are not single piece cast like the Blood and Plunder minis tend to be.
We really are spoiled.
Yeah, many of them, it's a torso and legs you glue onto a stand, and then you attach 1 or 2 pairs or arm pieces as well. So they come in as many as 4 pieces, I think. Which isn't terrible as far as modeling goes, but when you sit down to put 26 guys together, as opposed to just dumping 6 blisters on the table and cleaning them up, it just takes a little bit longer when you don't have time. So, anyways.
So here is what I'm going to paint. Okay, between now and the end of our second paint night in February. So that would be
adding this into the.
Let's see if we figure this out. So we have no paint night this Friday. Our next paint night would be February 12th, right?
The 12th and the 26th. The 26th is the final paint night of the month. I think we're just going to keep going with the final Saturday of the month as the
final Saturday
deadline.
So by the 27th. So here's what I'm gonna say I'm gonna get done. Okay. 8 pikemen, which I know are mostly done.
Well, you picked the model that's finished.
No. And then I'm gonna pick, I have 4 upgraded sailors. I'm just making a list for myself here. I have a Lorenz de Graaf model, and then I also have 4 European with weapons upgrades. Also,
Wait, isn't that the upgraded sailors?
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, the sailor weapon upgrades, the ones that I did in the last.
There might be another group that's like the close combat dudes or whatever. So basically it's 4, 8, 16, 17 models total.
Hold on. 8 pike, 4 upgraded sailors, Lawrence de Graaf, and what? Just 4 regular European sailors?
8 pikemen, 4 sailors, 4 weapon upgraded dudes, and Lorenz Graff. That
Okay.
would be 17.
17.
So I say that because those are the last ones I have that are fully cleaned and primed.
That's fair.
Obviously, the pikemen are started, but my goal is to basically finish it off because that would finish off the last of my box of like unaligned dudes, and that's the last set of models that I have before I have to dip into the set of Spaniards that I have to finish to complete a resolution for New Year's. So my goal
Okay.
this month is to basically finish off 17 models.
Nice. Considering I only gave myself 8 models for last month, and I managed to almost pull off 25.
And I have no problem with that. It's like this is a gentleman's agreement, so
It is.
totally fine.
I know I have 8 sailor with muskets next. But my question is, do I want to go further than that?
I think you should keep it manageable, especially if you don't know what's in store for you this month. I mean,
Well,
you literally, I'm giving you an out here, because you you have a farm and 2 kids, which are 3 things
Sure.
I don't have. So I completely get that your schedule is going to be different
All
than mine.
right. 8 musket sailors. Because they are next on the list. So also,
Now, I
just
can't promise that I'm not going to try to tell Alice to distract you or cause problems. So
if you get her to listen, I'll be taking notes.
she usually wants me to know things because she'll make a point of coming over to the microphone when you're trying to paint and being like, "This is important, Mr. Tom. I like chips." And it's it's always intense too. It's not
Yeah, it is.
there's no half measures. There's no half measures. She's a serious lady. It's very serious.
Yeah, you need to teach her German. She's perfect for it.
She is. She'd take to it naturally.
She'll be
Her
learning Pig
tongue
Latin
and
first.
everything.
Friend and I use Pig Latin around her when trying to be secret.
Oh no, has she figured it out?
Not yet, but we're gonna be doomed. So, are we gonna keep the same penalties, or do we need to assign new penalties?
I think we should do new penalties.
You're gonna. I already bought this up to make the last penalty.
You already planned to lose, Tom.
No, I just figured I'd have it.
Okay, so I think my penalty is I have to film a YouTube video of me doing the rigging for my flute.
Hold on, that would insinuate that you someday finish painting your flute.
Right, but I don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it. Every time I hear you guys talk about some
painting the flute.
No, you guys keep mentioning obscure sailor terms. Tyler's like, "Oh yeah, I buy my jigamadoos from a model sailing company." And it's yeah, they're only made in the forges of Mount Doom between September and October every year for authenticity. And every time you tell me these things, okay, I'm like, oh dear God,
no sane person does this. We've been over this. Don't do that. Just rig it.
I have to do a YouTube video if I fail.
Oh man,
for that.
My penalty.
That's a really good penalty. So.
Ooh, I know what I want. I want something.
Oh God.
Okay.
Okay. What is it?
So
I'm not feeling very inventive, so go for it.
Lamb chops.
Yes. Okay.
That's easier.
So if you don't make it, then I want you to ship me some cuts of lamb, with the, I don't know how you do it, but
oh my, that's
got it.
I love
lives
lamb.
on farm stuff happens.
Tom, I made a delicious chicken curry last night, and I was eating it, and I was just thinking, like, man, this would be so delicious with lamb.
I know, like, no, it's the best. Like, so lamb as a meat is the best meat with like any Indian dish or curry, hands down. Like, I always get like lamb vindaloo, and I always have that great conversation with like the waiter at the Indian food restaurant where he's like, "Do you want this spicy or do you want it like American spicy?" And I'll always look him dead in the eyes and I'll be like, "I want you to try to put me in the hospital." And they always have the same smile on their face, like,
I want to cry eating this.
let's dance, you know. And I'm sure that it's eaten away the lining of my stomach over the years, and maybe this is how I die, but it's worth it because it's delicious.
Well, I definitely made the stuff here, and I made an extra large pot, so I'd have several days of lunch if I ever make it to work this week. And I definitely like made it the normal spicy for the family, and then I just dumped in a bunch of spicy stuff when I made my bowl.
Next time we get to meet in person, if we get to like go out, and I definitely want to do Indian with you because like I want.
That's the crazy part. I've never been to a bunch of Indian places. I just discovered Indian food like during shutdown.
I have a really good place up here, and
it's great if we ever have a convention in the far north.
You know, it's actually funny. I have a ton of Indian students in Model UN. So like every time we go to DC or into the city, like when we do these Model UN trips, they will always help me pick out like the better restaurants, and it's really funny because they one of my favorite students, this kid who's graduating this year. I'll be really sorry to see him go because he's really funny. He gave me advice on how to pick the best Indian food restaurant ones. He's like, you want to pick one where they're clearly using furniture from their living room. And I'm like, why would that be a barometer? And he goes, because it tells you they're putting all their money and energy into their food and they don't care about the decor. Like they're focused on the food. And I've followed that as a guideline, and basically it always is true. Like the best Indian food I've ever had is from small little mom and pop places where it's very clear they're using their own recipes, and they don't go out of their way to make it some beautiful dining experience. It's all about the food. So that's my advice to pass on to you.
There's a Thai restaurant in the town that mom lives in, and I lived in for a long time, obviously, but it's the exact same way. It's like not quite back an alley, but it's off a side street, and that town it's the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, but it's kind of gotten a reputation for having a pretty good food scene. And the restaurant is like not where all of the other restaurants are. It's kind of on the other end of town and tucked away. And same thing, if you go in there with a light and can actually see, because they keep it very dim, it looks like, you know, the fabric from your grandmother's couch from the 70s.
That's because they know where to put their focus. Focus on the
food is amazing, so I will stand by that if you find some place that's grimy. Not grimy.
I love. Well, hey, they're called dive.
Low effort, good food.
I do love Thai food, though. Oh man.
Yeah. That's
right,
a little closer to where we go to. Yeah, so everyone's hungry now. Great.
Yeah, you're welcome, everyone.
We're recording this at 10:30.
You're welcome, everyone. Can't wait to get my hands on that lamb. I'm gonna eat that lamb. Anyway,
I was just musing the other day about how like if we were all sailors and like actually sailing, it would be things like we'd be trying things like, I don't know, monkey or whatever crazy things we find, turtle, dolphin, all the.
Oh yeah,
all the
I feel like of the three of us, I would likely be the first to die in terms of like eating something I shouldn't, doing something stupid. Just not having the basic common sense to tie the proper knot and just like getting myself decapitated. I feel like there's no end to the ways that I would have gotten myself killed on a European sailing ship in the 18th century.
I can definitely see a survival situation where Tyler and I are doing something and you approach and Tyler and I are just giving you that stare. Like, what the hell are you doing? And why did you do it wrong?
And I'd be like, I don't need to eat these oranges. Then my tooth falls out. You know, nobody can tell me what to do. All right, so we have a new segment we're going to close out with. And Glenn, why don't you take the lead on this? Because I think this is your
Kind of my
brainchild. And also
project.
we should give credit to the guy who helped us come up with this lovely name for this segment, because I thought it was great.
Yeah, we gave a little bit of a preview for this with Paint Night this past Friday. And I had pointed out that we didn't have a good name for it yet, and we were kindly assisted by Liam Taylor, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
Liam Taylor, who gave us the name Blood and Pedantry. A very British term, obviously. We don't hear that a lot in America. At least I don't. And I'm sure Tom's students are probably not giving him those kinds of words in their essays.
No, but as somebody who has been forced into indentured servitude tutoring rich kids for the SATs, I can tell you that pedantic is a very common word for me to force them to learn.
Nice. So, this will be our new trivia section. Each month is the plan is that each month we are going to put out a trivia question. The rules are we want everybody to send their responses to our brand new shiny email, talesofthesale@gmail.com. And that's tale as in story time, not tale as in critters on my farm. By the end of the month. So, as long as you try to remotely get it to us by the final day of the month, from whatever time zone you live in, I don't care.
If the guys can
We'll take
finish
the
their
answer.
bets, you can send in answers.
Right.
We will
exactly.
also we'll post the email address on our Facebook page, and we'll also post it in the description for this episode, wherever you've seen it posted. So you'll see the email if you want to take a stab at the question.
It's already on our Facebook page.
There you go.
I had that intelligent forethought. Then at the end of the month, once we have all the prizes, all the responses, we will select a winner at random from the correct answers. So if you answer the question and get it wrong, you're not in the prize draw. But if you get it right, you're in the prize draw. And then the winner and answer will be announced on the next podcast episode, which we usually record, today's the first of the month. Or not usually this on the ball, but usually it's early in the month. Which should give you most of them. That means the podcast should drop early in the month, which means you have most of the month to answer. So we'll announce the winner and next question, and then we'll get in touch with the winner via their email to get your shipping info and such. So
the prize this time is...
Yes, we're not talking huge prizes, usually. The prize this time is going to be your choice of a blister of North American Braves or Coeur de Bois. Our prizes, we're going to try to theme to the questions. So that's a little hint there. But the question is, in the United States, we often refer to the French and Indian War, but there were actually more than one. How many French and Indian Wars were there, and what were their individual names? And there are a variety of names for each of the wars because each combatant called it different things.
So be careful. Don't
I've written them all
names
down
that are the same war and think you've got four, because you could be wrong.
Right. Calling it World War One, the First World War, and the Great War doesn't give you three different wars. So I
one
have
more
the
time.
answers written down already.
So one more time, repeat the question.
So the question, in the United States, we often refer to the French and Indian War, but there was actually more than one. How many French and Indian Wars were there, and what were their individual names? Don't overthink it, guys. Also, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, this is an open note test. Okay, so you could look it up. But I will warn you that I'm going to tell you a story. Okay, and it's a story of Wikipedia, and it's the story of a time when I changed a page on Wikipedia. I invented a fake medieval count called the Duke of Burgundy, and I made up his fake page and then linked him into multiple other pages, because I gave kids a research project about the 100 Years' War, and I linked the Duke of Burgundy into all these different things, and I wrote these insane things about him. And then this is years ago, because I think Wikipedia has upped its game in terms of fact checking. They left it there. And so my students kept citing the fake article that I'd posted about this non-existent guy. So I'm not saying that I'm doing that to you, but check your facts. Just make sure. Learn a lesson, says the teacher.
I think Wiki now requires like an editor to actually look at changes before they're implemented.
Yes, they've gotten smarter because of dolts like me. But yeah, so you have until the end of the month. You email us at talesofthesale@gmail.com, and we will randomly select an answer from the winners. So I think that takes us to we're about an hour. I think we timed it actually.
We might actually do this on time. Yeah.
Did it on time. Good for us.
Are we allowed to do
What?
Guys, you gave it your best shot. We got off topic on lamb and curry and Indian food and
farming in general? It's usually my fault.
That is totally my fault. I'm fascinated by farming culture. Glenn's living his best life, and I just want to be a part of it.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to get painting because I've given myself plenty to do.
Hey, Tom, real quick
yeah,
question. Now that you've given yourself all of these ridiculous things to do, how many of these have anything to do with your New Year's resolutions?
0. They have nothing to do. But I will say this. Like, the way my brain works, okay, I have to clear the queue. Like, I have like a line of things to do, and I just have to mentally do them in a certain order. So once this is done, the only models I have left for Blood and Plunder is the Spanish project. That's it. So, like, this is me clearing the table and then getting to work on them next. That's the plan.
So you're just giving yourself the other 10 months to finish.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get there.
For the record, 8 Musket Sailors fits into either my Spanish or my Dutch force.
I know. I'm smarter than Tom. Me. I don't care, Glenn. Okay. I'm going to get it done. If I get tripped up on these resolutions, it's totally going to be the terrain making. That's what's going to kill me. Because if, like, once I get going on it, it's great. But starting is tricky. So I think next month, if I pull this off and the streak continues, I have to give myself a terrain-based goal. It has to be a terrain.
I'm pretty sure I told you that the terrain goals were going to be what killed you.
Yeah, you did. I mean, you're usually right. I feel like every time you tell me something and you're like, I told you this and I'm right. I don't know if you always expect me to disagree, but like, I do agree with you. I do know that you're right. Like, in fact, I don't think I very often tell you that you're wrong. Oh, Lord.
I mean, I can't say for certain, but I think this comes with just being a dad. Like, even
it's just dad mode. It's just dad mode.
It is just dad mode. I'm sorry, I didn't turn it off.
All right. Well, dad mode's a good note to end on, I think. So
yes, the best.
I'll say everybody thanks for joining us, and Glenn, go ahead and take us out.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to hearing all about the French and Indian Wars and which ones existed and didn't exist next time. So we'll see you all then. Can't wait to hear from you.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.